Weren't you with Dad? My 5-year-old daughter, Chris, came back home soaking wet during our visit to my in-laws' house. She was shivering, and her lips were blue. I had entrusted her to my husband, Andrew, so why had she returned home alone? Shocked, I called Andrew, but his tone was, as usual, I didn't bring Chris along. I couldn't comprehend what he meant. Unbeknownst to me, this statement hid an unimaginable secret. My name is Sophia Moore, 32 years old. Between Andrew and me is our 5-year-old daughter, Chris. At the beginning of our marriage, we were very close, and I remember how we hugged each other in joy when we found out about my pregnancy. I returned to work a year after childbirth and was living a fulfilling life. However, our happy life began to change at some point. Housework is the wife's job, even though we used to share chores like cleaning and laundry. 2 years ago, Andrew suddenly started dumping all household responsibilities on me. But I work too, I need your help, my mate says. Their wives do all the housework, even if they both work. You should tidy up more, he retorted and threw a ragged mop at my face. From then on, he became very critical about how I did the cleaning. During those times, he would often say, "You should take a leaf out of her book," referring to a certain person. That person was Marian Kirk, the housekeeper working at his parents' house. Andrew's father was a company president living in a mansion, and Andrew worked for him as well. Moreover, Chris was at an age where she couldn't be left alone, yet Andrew hardly participated in parenting. "Hey, what do you think Chris would like for her birthday present?" It was late at night in the living room after our daughter had gone to bed when I showed him a toy catalog. However, he barely glanced at the cover before setting it aside. "Why do we have to think about such bothersome stuff? She's our daughter. Aren't you a bit cold? Kids get bored of things so quickly, it's just a waste of money." Andrew then threw the catalog into the trash and stormed off to his room, yelling, "I'm not spending a dime on it." I felt as though he was denying our daughter, and I wanted to confront him. However, Chris woke up saying, "Mommy, I need to pee," so the conversation about the birthday present was left unfinished. We never found the right moment to talk again, and in the end, I bought something recommended by a toy store clerk with my own money. I'll tell Chris it's a present from both Mom and Dad. Watching her happily tear the wrapping paper made me feel indescribable. Meanwhile, Andrew began to spend lavishly on himself beyond his earnings. He told me it was for work-related socializing. However, as hundreds of dollars were being spent every week, I grew anxious about what exactly he was doing. "Hey, is it really just a work party?" "What, you doubting me?" "It's not that. I just think you might be spending a bit too much. I'm going to be the president of the company one day. I'll pay it all back then, so don't be so petty." Andrew wouldn't listen at all, and he continued to use the credit card, putting our finances in jeopardy. Without my income, this is how I started to feel frustrated with my husband. However, given our different backgrounds, I couldn't bring myself to blame Andrew entirely. Maybe it's inevitable. He thinks housework is for women, considering his mom was a stay-at-home mom. My husband, being the heir, might have his own struggles that I can't even imagine. Until he understands that women work too, I decided to be patient. I resolved to support him as much as possible until he becomes a great CEO like his father and feels more settled. Time passed, and one mid-March Sunday came around. It was my mother-in-law's birthday, and we had a tradition of celebrating it at my in-laws' house every year. Their home is about a 15-minute walk at an adult's pace straight down the road from ours. However, with Chris, it could take more than double that time since she always wants to stop at the park on the way. Also, it had become customary to stay over the night before on such special occasions. I can't wait to see Grandpa and Grandma. Chris always looked forward to visiting them. But on the Saturday before my mother-in-law's birthday, just as we were about to head to my in-laws' house with our bags, I got called into work. Mommy got to work. Should we go to Grandma's house tomorrow? Chris, quite mature for a preschooler, was never a bother. However, I felt bad about imposing on my in-laws to take care of a kindergartner. No, I want to go. Chris was all set to leave, already wearing her backpack filled with her favorite toys. What should we do if we stay? I'll have to take care of her, right? Then we'll just go to my dad's house by ourselves. But it'll be fine. I'll talk to them. He called my in-laws without waiting for my reply, starting to explain our situation. I wanted to say thanks to my in-laws, at least, so I borrowed Andrew's phone. I'm sorry for imposing Chris on you. We're family, no need for formalities. Thank you. With the housekeeper there and Andrew accompanying her, there's not much to worry about. Yeah, I thought to myself, my husband isn't cooperative with childcare, yet I made sure not to let that show, maintaining a calm demeanor. Eventually, they left our house in the afternoon, and I decided to finish up my work and go to my in-laws the next day. I quickly got ready to head to the office, grabbing my business bag. At that time, the sky was clear without a single cloud. However, as time passed, the weather took a turn for the worse, and by evening, it started pouring rain. As if predicting the future, it's cold. I got home early from work, and I arrived at 6 p.m. to heal my fatigue. I was in the midst of preparing a bath to leisurely soak in when this happened. The doorbell at the entrance rang. To my surprise, it was Chris, soaking wet. Chris, weren't you supposed to go to Grandma's house with Dad? Chris was trembling from the cold. Her lips turned blue. Her hands were as cold as ice when I held them. I couldn't get into the house because I didn't have the keys, she said with a quivering voice. However, seeing how tired she looked, I decided to let her take a bath first. In the meantime, I called Andrew to explain the situation. What's going on here? I didn't bring her to my dad's house. What? I thought you were taking care of her. How would I know? She ran off on her own. Apparently, on the way to my in-laws, our daughter suddenly started fussing, saying she didn't want to go unless Mommy was with her. Despite my husband's efforts to calm her down, she defied and turned back home on her own. However, since it's a straightforward route to our house, and she has walked it several times before, I thought she would be fine alone, so she headed to my in-laws' place on her own. I thought you'd be busy with work, so I didn't contact you. Wait a minute, didn't you say you were heading to your parents' house right after lunch? It was 6:30 p.m. by then. Thinking about it, it didn't make sense for Chris to be on her way to my in-laws at that time. I had some errands to take care of. It got late because I was wrapping those up. I let that slide, but I couldn't accept the fact that he let our daughter come home alone and she was soaking wet. Why didn't you at least give her an umbrella? I tried to, but she said she didn't need it and ran off. But before I could argue, Andrew, who had been rather indifferent until then, suddenly became aggressive. You're too overprotective. It's all your fault. She's such a disobedient child. Regardless of how I raise our daughter, she is not spoiled at all. I was infuriated to hear such a thing from my husband, who always neglected our daughter, and I couldn't help but raise my voice. However, he refused to acknowledge his fault and ended the call by saying, "She is safe, so there's no problem," and hung up unilaterally. I tried calling him back, but it seemed he had turned off his phone. My in-law's landline was set to voicemail. At this point, I figured the only option was to talk to her. Once things settled down, I called her over. "Why didn't you go to Grandma's house today? You were looking forward to it," I asked. Her eyes lost their sparkle, and she looked down slowly, opening her mouth to speak. "Is that true?" I asked, and she nodded deeply, but many questions still remained unanswered. In a short amount of time, I researched everything possible. So that's what it was. And then, from something unexpected, I came to know a shocking truth. "This is awful. I can never forgive them," I said, clenching my fists. I resolved to take revenge on the person who had put my daughter through such an ordeal. I then called my in-laws and said, "I'll be bringing Chris over tomorrow." I spent a sleepless night filled with anger. The next day I visited my in-laws' house. It was 8 a.m., a time when even the housekeeper hadn't arrived yet. I told my daughter to play in a room upstairs and went to the living room on the first floor, where my husband was still sleeping and snoring. "We need to talk," I said, waking him up with a nudge. "What's the big idea waking me up so early in the morning?" He grumbled. "Hey, why do Mom and Dad look so scary?" "Just sit down," I replied. Actually, it was my mother-in-law's birthday today, and I had initiated this meeting. However, sensing something was off over the phone, my mother-in-law suggested it's better to discuss important things sooner rather than later. At first, he was full of complaints, but he reluctantly complied after being admonished by his father, who is also the president of the company he works for. "Hey, why did she come back soaking wet yesterday? Didn't I tell you?" He started fussing halfway through, saying she wanted to go back. Then what is this supposed to be? I displayed a certain video on the large screen of the TV. "What is this?" he asked, visibly shocked. The screen was filled with a scene of him and the housekeeper, Marianne, closely embracing each other in the living room of my in-laws' house, like lovers. "When did you film this?" he asked. Actually, this was filmed with a toy camera I had given to her for her birthday. The camera was small and looked like a toy, so Andrew and the housekeeper must have never imagined they were being recorded. Chris didn't fully understand how to use the camera and seemed unaware she had filmed them. I was truly surprised when I stumbled upon this footage while researching. The two in the video paid no attention to the lens. "You said you came here in the evening, but you actually left the house right after lunch, didn't you?" I questioned. "Well, that's because," he began. "And you thought you'd sneak around with her when you knew your parents were out? I can't believe the housekeeper was your affair partner," I exclaimed. When they arrived at the in-laws, my in-laws happened to be at the department store because the birthday present they had ordered was being delivered. I had already confirmed this detail over the phone with them. "So you told her to play near the park because she was in the way and then you locked her out?" I accused. "Who told you that, Chris?" He clicked his tongue and furrowed his brow. The park and our house are very close, and she was able to see the lights on at home and figured. I had come back. How could you do such a thing while our daughter was around? Before being expelled from home by my husband, it seems my daughter was captivated by pressing the buttons of the camera. Fortunately, it seems she didn't catch her father's affair in her field of vision, which was really the only silver lining. This was a one-time mistake. I'm sorry. Andrew clasped his hands together towards me. However, I had another ace up my sleeve. "Oh, then how do you explain this?" I spilled a pile of love letters, apparently from Andrew to Marianne, onto the table. "You went through my room without permission," he protested. "You're the one who said I should clean up more, so I just happened to find it while cleaning every nook and cranny." He frantically tried to gather the pile of love letters, but I swiftly picked up one of them. "Let's see. To my beloved Mariana," I read aloud. "You call her that? Stop it, please." He turned red as a boiled lobster and covered his ears. For the final blow, I presented him with credit card statements and loan documents from the trash in his room. "You're allocating a significant amount for purchasing women's branded stuff. Moreover, you've taken on almost an equivalent amount of debt, haven't you?" I blatantly matched the numbers on the two documents with my finger. "You said you were spending money for work, but you were just splurging on your mistress. Moreover, tracing back the dates on the love letters and loan documents, the oldest was from 3 years ago. It seems this was not just a one-time mistake. My father-in-law, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. "You are despicable, but I can't help it. Marianne is cuter than you, after all," Andrew retorted. "Are you serious?" My father-in-law glared at Andrew, but he seemed unconcerned. "Marianne thinks of me first, and besides, she has a great body," Andrew continued, imagining whatever he was, extending his lips in a sleazy grin. "Shut up. Whoa, don't start yelling all of a sudden. You scared me," I intervened. "I disown you. You're fired from the company." Wait a minute. That's not fair." No discussion. My father-in-law, with a face like a demon, yelled at Andrew, and my mother-in-law silently nodded in agreement next to him. He pleaded for forgiveness from his parents, but they completely ignored him. Then he cheekily tried to wrap his arm around my shoulder. "Can't you just make nice with my parents? Why should I have to do that? Because you're my wife, aren't you?" "A wife is supposed to listen to her husband's commands," he insisted. "Don't rely on me only when it's convenient for you." I forcefully pushed away his hand and shoved him away with both hands. "I'm planning to consult a lawyer," I declared. "Are you serious about that?" he asked, shocked. "I intend to sue for child support, so be prepared," I replied sternly. "Come on, rethink this, please," he begged, realizing the gravity of the situation. He repeatedly bowed to me, sweating profusely. "Please don't abandon me," he cried suddenly, his face a mess of tears and snot, looking miserable. "No matter what you say, it's useless. My mind won't change. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." My husband screamed out an apology while kneeling down. But due to my husband's selfish actions, our daughter Chris had to spend time alone in the park, getting caught in the rain and suffering, and he had been betraying our family for years. There was absolutely no room for sympathy for him anymore. "I never want to see your face again, nor do I plan to let you see Chris. Goodbye," I said firmly, leaving him prostrate on the floor sobbing. After that, we got divorced, settling for $1,000 a month in child support. I also sued the housekeeper for $20,000. He, having lost his job and left with debts to pay, is said to be working multiple manual labor jobs late into the night. He's living a miserable life in a small apartment without a bath. The housekeeper broke up with him and returned to her hometown, only to be severely scolded by her parents and left with nowhere to go. Now I hear she's working in the NTI. Meanwhile, I moved to an apartment, starting a new life with Chris. My work performance was recognized, resulting in a salary increase. Chris is looking forward to starting school in April and is diligently practicing her writing. Watching her brings me the greatest happiness.